Okay, what we're referring to here is one of the called the Facts for Life edition, and there's an extract from that book in the resource folder, and on pages 5, 7, and 9 of the book, they talk about introducing, reinforcing, and practicing the count on one strategy. So I've included a few extracts from that resource here. So let's have a quick look and see what they talk about when they're talking about introduction. So they're introducing here, they've got the cubes in a container, and they write the number of cubes on the container. So you've already got, for example, 5 cubes in the container. You hold another cube above the container and drop it in, and you count on 1. Okay, so if we have a look at the container here, here's the container. There's 5 cubes put into the container. The 5 is written on the container. You add another 1. The students know they don't have to recount the 5 that were already in there, and they can count on 1 to find out that the total is now 6. And so you can do that with all other sorts of numbers as well, and looking at the count on for all of those. Still at the introduction step, they're saying that the teacher could use these large folder cards to show students 5 dots, and then fold out the card showing another dot, so that they've got 6 dots altogether. Again, they could count on, show the 5, then count on 1, 6. And then at the sorry, yes, Carolyn.
Yeah, sorry to interrupt. I just wanted to clarify, and forgive my ignorance, obviously this is all quite new to me. When you're saying count on, so 5 count on 1, that is the current correct language really that we are to be using. Is that right? It's not 5 add 1, it's 5 count on 1. Or is count on just that, a name to the methodology of this?
That's right. The count on is the name of the strategy that you're applying in this situation. So you might be presented with a situation where you've got 5 counters, for example, and you've got them in one group, and you've got 1 counter in another group. Because you're going to be initially doing this at the children's language stage, with the cubes that they were talking about there. We'll just go back to that page. When they're using the cubes up here, they're really operating the children's language stage. They're using everyday materials. And so you're also using everyday language here. So we've got 5 in there, and we put another 1 in, 6. Okay? And then you might start saying, okay, we've got 5, counting on 1 more, 6. Okay, so, and then when they start to get into the mathematics language stage, you might say we've got 5, add 1. We can use the count on strategy, 5, 6. Okay, so you're just counting on. Here at this reinforcing step, they're giving the students these individual folder cards that the students can construct to a certain extent, and they can work in pairs, and they practice using these cards and practice the counting on strategy with them there. Facts for Life books, the edition that these copies have come out of, I think, are probably out of print. And in the practicing stage, the teacher makes up these practice cards and can hold them up and ask the students to explain how they'd work out the answer, and then they can practice holding them up and the students answer as quickly as they can. Okay, so the question is to you, what overall statement could you say about this introduction step? What's happening at the introduction step, do you think, that is different to what's happening at reinforcing and practicing step? A lot of children's language, we are focusing here on the strategy as opposed to the concept, okay? And it tends to be a whole class activity, okay, rather than it tends to be a whole class with large resources and so forth. What about the reinforcing step? What sort of things are happening here? That's right. The students tend to be doing it on their own or with in a small group or in pairs. And they're creating their own resources rather than having a large class set of resources. These are individual resources. And what about the practicing step? What's happening here? It becomes more individual. Everything's in symbol form. So just sort of summarising it, I've sort of put together this little table just to summarise perhaps what's happening. That in the introduction step, they were using everyday concrete materials and large demonstration substitute materials, and tended to be whole class discussions and teacher demonstrations. And then at the reinforcing step, they tended to be small individual substitute materials with either diagrams or symbols, and working in small groups. And then finally, at the practicing step, they tended to be symbolic resources with individual responses. A resource that we've just been looking at considers the teaching of a strategy in a similar way to what's required in the concept, skills and strategy section of your assignment. Yes, Rachel, a symbolic resource could be a worksheet, that's right. And yes, the three steps do relate to the language model, and we're going to have a closer look at that in a moment. But just linking the sequence of activities that we just were looking at, this is the sort of sequence of activities that we are looking for in the teaching sequences for the concept, skills and strategy section of your assignment. So in that part of the assignment, you asked to describe how you would teach each of a concept, a skill and a strategy by describing the teaching sequences using all four language stages. So if we look at the rubric briefly, you've got to look at one concept, at least one concept, one skill and one strategy. Okay, you need to look at some pictures of the resources that you might use together with a brief explanation. Make sure your language and explanations are consistent with the language model. Don't just show your understanding. Don't just copy the stuff from the lecture notes. And you need to have a teaching sequence for a concept, another sequence for a skill, another one for a strategy, and you need to consider the four-stage language model in that sequence. So how does the four-stage language model, stages I've got on the left here, how do they compare to these three steps that were outlined in the resource that we've just been looking at? Well, I'd like to think that the introducing step had some links to children's language stage. What other links do you think there might have been here? If you'd like to draw them in. Some of the activities have a little bit of symbolic language in them there. I think in general, if we just take out that red one that's down there, the introducing activities linked to the children's language and the materials language, the reinforcing activities linked to materials and mathematics language, the practicing activities tend to link mostly to symbolic language. If you're going to have students practicing at the symbolic language stage, you'll always find some students will still want to use the materials and are still really at this mathematics language stage. Okay, could you put a tick if you're happy with question 7, or a cross if there's something you want to follow up there? Okay, moving on to question